Hi everyone, my name is Chris Fong. I had the pleasure of working with Daniel back in the day at Google on two teams. I had the opportunity to start this community of 33,000 ex-Google employees. And what we do is really gather amazing people like Daniel to educate everyone. And in many cases, we also open up to non-Google employees or Google alumni, as we want to make sure we're sharing the knowledge with everyone. Daniel and I actually caught up earlier this year when I was in Miami, and we're talking a few different topics that we could be actually helping with the community. And I'm so glad he accepted this invitation to share today about his own career from before Google, the time at Google, how he decided to leave to pursue his career in more engineering and product-led sort of paths. And so we're going to do a fireside chat about his career transitions and do an open Q&A with him. And I'm sure we'll have lots to learn from Daniel over the next hour. Before I kickstart my own questions, Daniel, would you mind filling in the gaps and give us your background since you have such an illustrious career?
Thanks again for having me, Chris. Hi, everyone. As Chris mentioned, I'm Daniel Cintra. I'll give you the long version. Usually, when I do startup pitches and that kind of thing, I'll have my intro done in about 60 seconds to a T, and there are reasons for that. But today, I'll just share a bit about my background. So, started off as an intern actually at Google in the New York office. That's when I first actually met Chris. I think that's over 20 years now. And I was on the sales team. So I was started off my career selling search ads and specifically in the alcohol vertical. So I was the alcohol guy at Google who knew all the alcohol brands and would help sell search advertising. Then went off and did a strategic partnership. So Chris and I worked on the channel sales partnerships team, which is essentially a reseller team of Google products. And did that for a few years and then was dabbling at night. So one of the things that Google was fantastic at was giving you extracurricular credits. So you could spend money to pursue any kind of like education. And I was moonlighting with a couple of friends. We were trying to get a startup off the ground. Unfortunately, four of us had only ideas, but no engineering skills. So I ended up trying to help out my friend who was the only engineer and started teaching myself to code. The startup didn't go anywhere, but the coding did. And so I decided to pursue computer science in grad school. Where I specialized in computer vision. Upon graduating, became the head of product for a computer vision startup out of New York City. We were trying to make sense of video data at the time. And we actually had the fortune of working with the Obama administration, who were deploying body-worn cameras across the country. And so they were looking for technologies to be able to make sense of all this video data. One thing led to another. We got acquired by the largest body-worn camera manufacturer in the country. And that's where I led up the product development for the AI initiatives for that particular company. So I got to work on really interesting problems like gunshot detection to how do you reduce racial bias in policing and all these kind of like gnarly problems. And then got the startup bug again, got lured into the Allen Institute for AI up in Seattle, a research lab out of there, and we can talk a bit about that. But they essentially have an incubator where they invite folks to be entrepreneurs in residence, where whether you have an idea or you're looking for co-founders, really great space where I met two of my co-founders and we ended up starting a company called Augment. Did that for a few years and going from 0 to 1. And then most recently joined Envera as their chief product officer. And it seems like a lot of folks from Envera are actually here. So I'm excited to chat to the group.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It sounds like it was the bug from startups and building that got you down the engineering and product track. Did you know you want to do startups when you were growing up, Daniel, or what did you want to do when you were growing up?
Yeah, it's funny. I was a voracious reader of TechCrunch, and so was always enamored with startups and what was happening in Silicon Valley at the time. I think technology always spoke to me, so that was definitely something I was always an early adopter of new products and services, and people would joke around with me because I was always switching to like the latest email client or learning like how to use a new calendaring app, which to some might feel unproductive, but to me it was always like a worth experimenting with and trying to see if I could be more productive. So what I didn't realize or appreciate at the time that I started a company was I'm at at the heart a generalist. So I love dabbling in multiple different topics and areas of the business. I was never really someone that would focus on, okay, I really want to hone in my skill for a particular function. And so what I learned pursuing my own startup was that I could finally, you know, touch multiple areas of the business and apply my experiences across many different roles in my career to my startup and trying to get things off the ground. Um,
Was there any particular story in TechCrunch that really caught your eye back in the day when you were reading it?
oh, oh man, there's so many. I mean, this is you know, like I think one thing TechCrunch does is it romanticizes what startups are, and I think to some extent I think it's amazing that they do that because I think the startups are probably the hardest thing you could possibly do, and I think taking that those stories and romanticizing what it is to start a startup it is actually helpful because I think ignorance is bliss sometimes. And so I don't think there's anything that really stands out there, just like so many amazing things that are happening across the board. And I think what I've liked over the time is that there's less of a San Francisco centric approach to things, and it has gotten global in scale. And I think that's just the nature of technology. It's just becoming democratizing. So.
And so for now, how do you stay up to the latest tech news? Is it still TechCrunch, or what sources of resources do you actually use to actually stay up with the latest in tech as well as in startups?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of go-tos for me. So TechCrunch is still up there, but that's more just for like the entertainment of things. I think there's some I've subscribed to that I really enjoy, like Benedict Evans's newsletter. He was a former Morgan Stanley analyst who then worked for Andreessen and writes really thoughtful pieces. There's the Exponential View as well that talks about some like the latest technologies. And then lately I've been a subscriber to The Information, and they just give you a pretty neat deep dive into what's happening in terms of like technology and whatnot. And then to keep up with some of like the happenings in the AI fields, like there are a bunch of other newsletters that I follow or research papers that I tend to read because I think that kind of gives you an edge as well of like what's coming and what's next and how you can bring these technologies.
So one of the things I wanted to delve into was your time at Google and sales and deciding to pivot and change your path from that. Was it a hard decision to make, or what did you go through? You did mention how you did do it, but can you talk through and unravel and unwrap the decisions in your mind? Because a lot of people who are perhaps in sales jobs will transition and continue in perhaps getting more pay raises, move into selling different products, maybe rising up, and it's a very compelling and well-paid career. Could you share more about how you decided to move away from that path?
Yeah, so I was at Google for about 6.5 years, and predominantly in sales functions. And I kind of knew that uh, I wasn't necessarily going to be an account executive or go through you know the linear career path at Google, just because I saw that my interests were more in other areas of the sales process. So some of the things that I remember was I loved building like tooling for sales teams to be better or be able to use data to influence their stakeholders or potential clients. So I was always dabbling in that kind of in my spare time from my account management role. And at one point, I really wanted to get into product management. But Google at the time, I don't know if it's still true, they had a requirement of having a computer science degree to even be able to pursue those functions. I know there are outliers of folks who've been able to pursue that without that at the time, but for me, I was just constantly being told, hey, you can't switch because like sales, your sales background is possibly not irrelevant to how we build products and whatnot. And so that was kind of yeah, it was a bit of a blow at the time, but that essentially kind of drove me to start pursuing engineering classes. I took like a SQL class at NYU, and then just started building like more and more knowledge around engineering and that kind of thing. And then decided, you know what, like I really want to pursue something outside of sales. Probably could have done something easier than pursuing a grad school degree, but that's kind of what I chose, and to basically end up in product management eventually.
Awesome. So let's talk about
So
the colleagues you had,
no, go for it.
and we both had at Google, and if they're thinking about transitioning, how should they think about transitioning? And I'm sure you're reading the same things I am, and you have a lot of same friends I do. A lot of them are worried about their jobs. How would you recommend they think about transitioning or learning new skills to perhaps recession-proof themselves or layoff-proof themselves? Or
I mean, I think it starts from the beginning, especially if you're at Google, you're pretty fortunate. Like I think the way I looked at that switch was it always felt like Google could be a future path, even if I left, right? Like it kind of, in my mind, acted like a safety net. Like I felt like I could come back to the company, even if I decided to do something else. And I think, Chris, you and I, we both have friends who, spent 10 years outside of Google and then came back to different roles, and that happens time and time again. So I think that kind of gave me that mental safety net. Then the other thing for me was look, I think you're especially today, I think it's harder to find people who really pursue like those linear career paths. And I think one thing that always helped me was to just be open to learning new skills and perhaps doing that in your part time, or even a lot of the times, even at large companies like Google, there are teams that are under-resourced, and they're possibly looking for a designer or someone to do the project management or even product management for their particular area of focus. And so I think finding those people, you're going to face a lot of like rejection saying, hey, no, we don't need your services, but like someone is going to take a shot on you. And I think that's true for anything. It's just the amount of reps that you put in and having the grit to just stick it out.
and did you have to get permission from your managers to make sure you're doing your day job and having all these things, or did you ask forgiveness later? How does someone go through that process?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think at least at the time for me, I think now later in my career, I'd probably ask for forgiveness, but early on, I felt like, I needed to be really well versed in what I do so that I can uh, accomplish certain things like faster than a new hire or something. And at some point you reach a level where like you can do a lot of like the stuff your day to day in a more productive manner than when you first started. And so then the next step there is, okay, now that I've mastered my role, now I can start like peeking out my head and like looking for how I can have like a larger impact across the org, and that's kind of always been my approach. So I think first master that initial skill set, and then ask your manager or start speaking to other teams and say, hey, like, how can I be helpful?
Let's stay on this pathway. Imagine if you stayed at Google, you didn't transition after 6 years, you're still in the sales partnerships type of landscape. How would you recommend folks who perhaps follow that path and continue the path think about pivoting away or start thinking about other things they should be doing just in case? In fact, someone just shared with me, someone on the sales enablement team at Google was laid off today. So those things keep happening, right? So how does someone start thinking about what kind of things they should be doing alongside their day job at Google? If imagine you were still there, what would you be doing if you were Dan Cintra at Google today?
Yeah, I think Google again, like it's just such a incredible place that you can find opportunities wherever you are. And I think one of the things that I did early on was I don't know if this still exists, but there was a tool called Lightbulb. Um, and Lightbulb was essentially a form that you could fill out with just like a product idea or something. And at the time, I had been working out in Buenos Aires, and something came to mind based just on how we pitched a product. And then from that, I had a product idea. And just submitted it to Lightbulb. Suddenly it got picked up by an associate product manager. They're like, hey, this is really interesting. We should maybe like build out a product around this or like a proof of concept. Um, Next thing I know, 3 years later, it was one of the most successful commercial betas that Google had ran. That at the time, I think within a year was had $100 million run rate. And that was simply because I filled out a form and then kind of joined the team meetings, even though I didn't have beyond the idea much to contribute in the sense of like actual work. I thought it was super interesting to see how the product team and engineering teams were work together. And that was kind of like my first insight into product management and all that. So I think, again, I think don't shy away from pitching new ideas. I think sometimes they'll get picked up, other times they won't. The other thing I think is very different from back then is engineering or even product building has really become democratized. If you check out some of the latest advancements in like AI, there's a company called Replit. You can, with natural language, build an app within minutes. And so it's you don't necessarily need to know HTML. You don't need to know the code. All you have to do is have the imagination, which everyone has. And so I think more and more of that is going to happen. You just have to be open to testing these things and constantly iterate on some of like these ideas.
And you mentioned earlier that you went through a master's degree to do the career transition. Are there any latest programs, classes, platforms that you would recommend folks explore to perhaps do their own transitions through?
Well, I'm a huge fan of Udacity. I've taken a bunch of classes there, even to just like refresh on some of like the latest AI concepts and that kind of thing. They make it really, really accessible on whether you have any programming skills to none, and then they have like a really great breadth of classes. And then there's always your local universities. They typically have continuing ed classes, which I've done. I think at some point I was taking classes on a quarterly basis. So I always had something going on outside of my core job, just to keep learning, because that's how you build a competitive edge as well in the marketplace.
No, thank you for sharing that. So folks, for those who recently joined, we're going through the career transitions and the advice that Daniel has from his time in sales and partnerships at Google to studying to doing startups and selling a couple of companies that he was part of and now in his new roles. Feel free to start typing your questions if you have any. Let's go and answer a question that was submitted over here, Daniel. He is asking more of details about AI newsletters that you would recommend, and if you can actually perhaps throw in a few, that'd be fantastic. Hi, Nicholas. I think you're joining in from somewhere in Germany. Welcome. Go, Dan.
Yeah, so I think you've captured a couple of here. Exponential View for sure, Benedict Evans. There's a great Substack. I'm blanking on the name. If you give me like 1 second here, I'll find it because I have it in my uh, newsletter. There's whilst I look this up, another one is voice AI. If you're interested in just what's happening in the voice space, it's by a company called Crisp. They basically do noise canceling, but they have a fantastic newsletter that kind of covers products to research to all kinds of things in the voice space. So this is for the Envera folks here. That's pretty relevant to what we do. So keep a heads up on that. Then let's see. Yeah, I'll try and find it. This Substack here. Here we go. The top information retrieval is what it's called. Papers of the week, and so this is an individual who typically it's more research based. So he'll summarize the latest research papers around the AI space and kind of put it in very layman's terms to kind of understand, okay, this is what it's useful for. This is what they're working on and how you move forward. So that's a good one if you want to be a little more technical.
Awesome, thank you. So let's go to the time after Google. You study engineering. What did you do then? Did you intern for companies? Did you apply for startups? Can you share more about what you were doing right after that time period?
Yeah. So I studied computer science, but with a focus in computer vision. And the computer vision part really just ended up being my focus because I loved the professor. Like I just had a really good fortune of having an amazing professor who just like taught complicated topics in really interesting ways. I wasn't sure what path I wanted to take after the CS degree, so I actually was interning at a VC at the time because I thought that could be an interesting career path. Because for me, again, my what I gravitated towards was more being a generalist, and so something that I could apply, different experiences to my role, I felt was a better fit for me. So I interned there, and then once the computer vision stuff started piquing my interest towards the end of my degree, I had a set criteria for what I wanted to do next, and I knew at that point I wanted to go into startups. And so my criteria were I wanted to take quite a bit of risk coming from Google. And so instead of going for a large company, my criteria were I wanted a company that had less than 10 employees, so I could see the upside there. Second was I wanted something in the computer vision space. And then third, I wanted something in New York City. So at the time, that meant there were only 2 companies in the entire city that were doing fit these criteria. So spoke to both, hit it off with the founder of Dextro, and next thing's history.
Can you tell us more about the other company? Are they still around, and what are they doing?
They are. So the other company is called Clarify. They've done phenomenally well as well. They basically built. They were a competitor to ours. We decided to exit the company to Axon, and Clarify kept going. So I think either one would have been a phenomenal experience, and it was a really fun time to work on these problems, because at the time I think it was a lot harder to do some of the stuff that we were doing than it is today.
You clearly made a lot of right decisions and a lot of decisions that perhaps took a bit of bravery from someone who didn't have those experiences. Can you share more about mentors and how perhaps you seek advice from others who may not even be official mentors to you, and how can someone on this call seek advice from other folks that they could get insights from?
Yeah, I think someone I was listening to something the other day, and they put it really well. Like you should think about how do you build your board of directors personally. And so typically the way you set up board of directors is folks from different backgrounds and skill sets augment, your team's knowledge or your own. And so I've always sought to look for people I can ask about various different topics, whether it's marketing, whether it's product, whether it's engineering. I have like a list of folks that I just have on speed dial for when I ask. And so sometimes these are people that I sought just because I might have read their like newsletter and I thought, hey, maybe I could ask them for advice and add them to my list of folks. So cold emails actually work a lot of the times. Again, like you have to be okay with rejection, but those do work. And then others were relationships that I just forged over the course of the years, and I think a lot of the times people don't necessarily take advantage of their networks, and sometimes someone in your network knows someone else that has the knowledge that you're trying to or has a potential mentor in mind for you. I think the more open you are about some of the problems you're facing and talking about them, people are pretty willing to help out.
You talk about cold emails. Can you just share your structure of cold emails and perhaps how you've been able to get to success and find success from getting people to respond to those cold emails?
Yeah, yes, I've used them in various different ways, whether it's like trying to get a new job to trying to have a famous person do something for a startup for free sometimes. And the structure really follows the following. Basically, obviously, start off with an introduction, but have something pithy that fits in line with what they work on. So do your research on the individual that you're reaching out to, and see what kind of projects or past work that they've done, and then tell them how you can be helpful too. Because it can't just be one-sided. It really has to be a collaboration between the two. And like usually you can find problems that they're trying to solve for, and you can offer advice on how to solve for it, or maybe even do the legwork for them. Maybe tell them like, hey, you know what? I know you never asked for this, but here's how I've done all the research about this particular vertical that I think you're interested in. Here's how I can be helpful. And I'd love to just get on a Zoom call to tell you more about what I'm working on.
Cool. That's a pretty good way to get approaches. And just one last thing about on that topic. What do you put in the subject? Is it a subject that matters? Is it a content of the email?
I think it depends. It's funny. Like I tried studying, like subject headlines, and there's obviously like loads of like blogs that you can read about. Hey, should you use an emoji to catch someone's attention or whatnot? I think I think you just have to be authentic. Like if sometimes I would just say, hey, like we're this startup and we're looking for help on this in the subject line, and sometimes people would respond or not. Again, I think one thing I've learned, especially doing startups, is rejection is perfectly fine, and you just have to be you have to get used to it. It's grit that matters at the end of the day.
So let's continue the journey. You joined a startup, it got sold, it got acquired. You were there for a while, sounds like it. Then you decided to join the Allen Institute to pursue other research and other startup opportunities. How did you know how to join the Allen Institute? So for someone looking to do startups or trying to pivot around their career, how would you perhaps suggest they start exploring the version of Allen Institute for themselves?
Yeah, I think for me was I knew I wanted to do a startup. I didn't have co-founders at the time. I had a couple of ideas that I was interested in pursuing, but I wasn't 100% tied to those ideas. I was open to like meeting folks and whatnot. And I think again, these days there's fantastic programs all over. So one of the other ones I was looking at was Entrepreneur First. That's kind of like a Y Combinator-esque version, but for founders. So you have 90 days to find your co-founder, start a business, and get demo day ready. So it's pretty intense. So I was nearly going to pursue that, but then what I felt with the Allen Institute was theirs was a bit longer in the sense that you had 9 months to one, work on the idea, do all the research, find your co-founders if you needed any, and then build out the product. And so it was less, there was less of a forcing function to get things done within 90 days, but which to me felt daunting. Meeting someone for the first time and then committing to them for the next 10 years. That was just not something I was too brave to do. But yeah, I think incubators are a fantastic way because they kind of give you all the support structure that you need, especially if you're starting off for the first time.
No, I've had different opinions thrown at me regarding incubators, accelerators, programs, and I feel there's no right answer. It's really about the right answer for the individual at that point in time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think for me, it was I wanted to be somewhere that had a focus on AI, which now more and more incubators are doing. And then also the support system that they provide is really, really important. So if you do want to go out at it alone, like you don't necessarily need an incubator. Again, you are giving up equity by doing so. But for me, I think it provided me like the support structure that I felt I needed at the time to go off on my own and start something.
Okay. So before we continue on L Institute forward, let's actually backtrack a bit. We didn't cover Monjay. So talk about the Monjay.
Oh, yeah.
What did you learn from that? What can you share? I think one of your co-founders is on the call as well now.
He is, yeah. Shout out to Al Chen here. So so this is back in, I don't know, I want to say 2008 or something. And all of us living in New York City, we're big foodies, and we just felt like Google Maps just wasn't doing it for us in terms of like being able to share lists of like restaurants we liked with our friends, and there's like no social aspect to it. And so a couple of us would meet after work at Google at like 8 p.m. And stay in the office until like 11 p.m. just like working on Manger. And it was essentially think of it as like Yelp with friends. And so you could kind of look up folks' lists, you could share them. And this was before I think at the same time as like Foursquare. Foursquare really, really nailed the product. And we had like some good ideas, but we couldn't really get it off the ground. But it was an amazing experience. I think all of us like went off and I think everyone's pursued it. Everyone was in sales at the time, apart from our one engineer. But everyone after that experience then went off and did various different roles. One of them's in product, the other one's Al is in growth marketing. So yeah, I think just dabbling in trying to build something from scratch was a phenomenal learning experience.
And I feel that that problem is still unsolved, especially now. I've been reading so many people are being paid to clearly rate restaurants and places on Google reviews and all these different locations, right? Is anyone doing that well, or is there an opportunity for Monjay to be reignited?
um I think so. I mean, it's funny. I just saw someone in the chat say that Foursquare was an Google alum project. And yeah, Dennis Crawley, who started it. I think I'm probably, yeah, 20 years later, I'm still a Foursquare user. So that's, yeah, I think that says something. Either no one has built something that I felt jumping to. I think there's a few publications like The Infatuation that are New York focused that do a really good job finding restaurants, but there's no social aspect. So that might be still a niche in the market that needs to be solved. Yeah.
That could be a great startup idea. Someone on this call or watching this should actually go forward with that.
I will say one thing, consumer startups are really, really hard to get right. So just just a little bit of a free advice there that getting consumer right, you need it's like catching lightning in a bottle, which sometimes works out.
So before I move away from Monjay, Al, do you want to ask any follow-up questions on this topic?
Hi everyone. I was telling Chris I'm here just to troll Dan. Who was the most influential person you worked on with that project?
Oh, clearly you, Al. Well, actually, you know what? Like, Al and I. So again, like the team composition was very lopsided, right? So we had a single engineer working on an iPhone app, the website, and everything else, and everyone else was just like feeding ideas and trying to play, trying to be useful in some kind of capacity. And I think Al and I just really felt sorry for Lucas, who was our engineer at the time, and we just started teaching ourselves to code to kind of help him out. And I think that was that was probably one of the best forcing functions for both of us to get a little more technical.
And where is Lucas today?
He's in Austria and he runs a socks business. So they make fantastic merino wool socks out in Austria. So anyone heading out to the Dolomites or Austria, go to
Get him
Wonder
away from
Socks.
tech startup, clearly.
Yeah. I mean, he started that as a family business, and it's doing fantastic.
Well, let's go on to Allen Institute moving forward. What was amazing with Allen Institute, and can you share more about how perhaps people should apply? Is the program still around? Please share more about that.
Yeah, again, like I can't speak highly enough of the Allen Institute for AI Incubator. The way it's set up is they invite entrepreneurs and residents, and so you can apply online. So again, like you can have your own idea, or you might be looking for other co-founders as part of the program. Um, they do take applications year round. So they don't necessarily have like cohorts or anything, so you can join at any moment in time. And the way they stand out is again, it's that support structure. Like once we were ready to fundraise, we went through like they just set up I want to say 100 meetings with VCs that they felt were interested in speaking to us. And so we had like a um, I think 30-day marathon of just back-to-back VC meetings and from all the largest VCs to some of the smaller players. But they really just set you up for success on raising that first pre-seed round. And I can't speak highly enough of the team. So yeah, if you're focused on building a AI centric startup, that was definitely something I'd recommend doing.
And let's discuss the company that you ended up partnering with your co-founder on. Can you share more about that company?
Yeah, so we were basically, so this is before ChatGPT and all the AI craze. So we started a company called Augment, and Augment was all about creating a personal assistant. We felt there was a gap in the market that there was no assistants at the time that actually knew about you and your context. And so the um, the insight here was more of like a technical insight where we used accessibility interfaces to be able to tap into the OS of the computer. And so we could pull in with the user's permission all the apps and documents that they were interacting with, and then we essentially created a graph underneath to make sense of all that data. So whether Chris and I were collaborating on Google Docs or in an email, Augment was able to tie those things together, and then you could ask like questions about, okay, hey, what was that one product that Chris and I were working on? So think of it as like a co-pilot, but OS agnostic. So it wasn't just built for Windows. We operated on the Mac and whatnot. So
And can you share about the transition from that to where you are now?
yeah, I so we got it to a point where we were going from 0 to 1, and the team's still operating, and they're still off to the races building out the product, and so it came to a point where it was a good juncture for me to pursue my next chapter. And one of the things that I was thinking about was, especially because we'd started the company before all the ChatGPT craze, I felt like there was a gap in the market, especially in the technology space where, or AI space, where everyone was sort of gravitating towards the same problems or similar problems, whether it was sales, marketing, legal, or coding assistance. Like very broadly speaking, it felt like a lot of startups were trying to solve for like those four key problems, and that's a huge market. And I think there are going to be really, really large successful players that come from that. But what I wanted to do was kind of go against the grain, which is a takeaway I've had like across my entire career. I've always like sort of done the opposite of what typical people do, like pursuing a computer science degree coming from an economics background. And so in this case, I was introduced to Envera, who are building software-enabled security, access control, and remote video monitoring for community associations, property managers, and residential developers. And when I started looking into the company, there was so much that the company is already doing in the forms of technology and applying AI. And the potential there was just huge to kind of take it to the next level using some of like the latest models. And so I was looking for something a little more an industry or companies that weren't necessarily in the talks within like the tech circles of New York City or San Francisco, because I do think there's a huge opportunity in the market, especially in some of these overlooked industries, that can benefit from technology and have a real social impact, like we're having at Envera.
And how did you find out this opportunity?
So as life goes, you meet people along the way of your career. And one of my first clients or partners was Dax, who's actually the CEO of Envera. And him and I have kept in touch for over 20 years now, and we always wanted to work together again. When I was at Google, he had moved to a bunch of different companies, and somehow always ended up with me on the other side, on the Google side. And so we got to know each other pretty well, and just kept up with each other's careers and all that. And so when he recently joined Envera as the CEO, he asked me to kind of look at things and see how we might be bring a more like customer and product centric lens to the company, and so yeah, we started chatting. I came in as a bit of a consulting capacity, and then we made things official about a month ago.
Amazing. Congratulations. It sounds like a lot of amazing colleagues are here on this call today. Anything that you can share about?
Yeah, very supportive group.
How perhaps what you're looking to do over the next couple of years, and if you're hiring, perhaps who you're hiring for, what you're hiring for?
Yeah, we're hiring across all areas of the business. I think we're at a really interesting juncture of the company. So the company's been around for over a decade now, but I think with the advent of you know, a lot of like the latest AI models and what you can do at the edge in terms of like edge computing and that kind of thing, it really sets us up for some really interesting problems. And I don't think if you're more on like the if you want to work on like really hard technical problems, like this is a fantastic place to be, because we ingest all kinds of data, whether it's video, text, or audio. And so someone who's interested in applying, being an applied AI engineer, like this is a fantastic place. I think on the sales side, we're expanding beyond Florida and Texas, and so there's like some really it's a really amazing time to be there. And then we're small enough that there are multiple areas of the business that you can have an impact on. So I think it's just a great recipe for someone who's hungry and wants to learn about various different areas of the business, or even sink their teeth into an amazing industry as well.
In specific roles you're looking to fill, or backgrounds you're looking for, they can share. Fully remote?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So we are remote. So we are based in Florida, but we have employees across the US. We even I have someone on the team who's based in Brazil. So I think we're not opposed to finding talent wherever it may be. And on my particular team, hiring for designers, engineers, product managers. We also have a small but mighty marketing team, and then I know a few folks on the sales team here are looking for folks to help us on that front as well. So
Awesome.
Across all areas of the business, really.
And before I pass it over to Hanson for his question, how should someone reach out to you? They want to apply for one of the jobs or get in touch, Dan?
Yeah, you can hit me up at dan@inverasystems.com. I can drop that in the chat. And yeah, happy to help or be helpful for anyone.
What's great for the folks who are listening from Brazil, Dan has heritage there, and still fluent in Portuguese and German, I assume, Dan?
Yes, I just had my high school reunion in Germany, and so that was an experience.
So any
Get to
Europeans on the
practice my
call,
German.
hit up Dan in German. So Hanson, let's go to your question. Go for it.
Oh, right. Hi, Dan. Nice to meet you. I'm Hanson. I'm calling in from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. No, so great to meet you. And I was just curious to ask. I look, sort of on LinkedIn. I was just kind of, casually looking, and prior to sort of taking on a product role at Dextro, I mean, you were basically sort of, mainly in strategic partnerships, right? And now I just realized that you were also, Monjay. But how did you land that transition into a product role at Dextro? And that's one, given that you were previously maybe not technical, and then subsequently, how did you sort of progress? And I think I'm just asking this because I think a lot of people, who benefit from understanding how you did that. So yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think I think there's probably shorter paths to make that transition. In my particular case, I left Google from that strategic partnerships role to go back to school. So I went to grad school for computer science, and so then that's how I built up, or at least got the credibility, I suppose, to be able to talk about computer vision and that kind of thing. But I think there are shorter paths. Like, I don't think you necessarily need to go back to grad school to do that. There are, again, fantastic resources like Udacity that can get you up to speed on engineering concepts or product management. I think the other misconception I had at the time, which I think 20 years later I would have liked to have told my younger self, was I was told that product management, you needed a computer science degree. And that might be true for some companies, but it's not true for every single one. So I think finding, that the right balance between perhaps the company size or their product philosophy, I think that's really helpful and sales, at the end of the day, like you're building up a lot of like skill sets. Like, how do you persuade folks to buy into like your narrative or storytelling and all this? And I think all of those skills can be applied to various different areas across the business, whether it's product, marketing, or whatnot.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, great. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, folks who have questions, feel free to raise your hands. If not, I can ask Daniel another hour of questions myself. Yeah. I don't think Dan has another hour, but Dan, how did you decide not to get into venture? Clearly, you have someone close to you who's in venture. You explore venture yourself. For those who really thought of going to venture capital path, why did you choose not to go down that path?
I think it's because I love being an operator. And I really like sinking my teeth into and getting hands-on experience. So I think venture. So my fiance, she works in venture and has her own fund, and I think what's fascinating about that area is that you get to learn about so many different industries or problems that people are working on. And so I think it's a really, really interesting career. But for me in particular, I love just building product or really being in the weeds. getting involved with my team, seeing like trying to A/B test, you know, certain things. Are they working or not? And just like trying them out and getting hands-on experience. Whereas I think in venture, like you're a little more detached from like the day-to-day, which is, you know, by design. Because like you're not necessarily operating the business, but I think you are advising startups. So that was really what I gravitated towards.
Awesome. Any final questions from anyone? If not, I'll keep going until we finish this in 3 minutes.
I do have one, Chris. This is Tida House here. Nice to hear from you, Dan. I wanted to hear a bit more on the personal side because as a mother of three, I think it's difficult to manage like a career and your projects. So did you have like to sacrifice anything in your personal life? Because going back to, you know, grad school means no salary for 1 or 2 years, and then is your spouse also supporting, you know, those type of things? And did you like, you know, build a family, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have kids myself, not as of this moment. But at the time, I basically signed up for not earning a salary for a year and a half. I think well, I was fortunate enough at the time because Google's stocks had done somewhat well, and even at like a younger time, it was enough for me to kind of like sustain my life in New York. I did have to make a bunch of sacrifices, maybe not eat out as much and cook and whatnot. And yeah, it was a lot of personal sacrifice. I think, especially for me, you know, my social life took a hit, frankly, because I didn't have a background in computer science, and so I did have to put in a lot more effort at the time, and so I don't think there's been a year and a half where I had more all-nighters than I did during grad school, just because I was making up for you know, my lack of knowledge or experience in the computer science space. So yeah, it's by no means it was a walk in the park, but you know, as long as like I have the support system around me to kind of keep me going and sort of say, hey, I'm making these sacrifices because I know at the end something good is going to come out of it, and you just have to believe in that. And I think it was a hard fought year and a half. Hopefully that answers it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think often we hear success stories, but we don't hear like the hardship behind. So I was just like admiring, and but yeah, it has a cost.
Yeah, no, it totally does. Like, look, to get even more personal, I think by the end of my grad school, I had dislocated my knee also, playing soccer, and so like for the last 6 months, I was on crutches, heading up from Brooklyn all the way up to the west side, Upper West. And yeah, I think in part, like at the time, my partner, she was super supportive, but it took a strain on our relationship, so we did end up breaking up like shortly after. But I think things happen for a reason, and I think I don't think I'd be who I am today had I not gone through those hardships. So whilst things might be hard at the moment, I think like there's always a rhyme and a reason for things. So
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Dan.
Then 2 more questions. Then let you go. One is, where will you be in 10 years' time? And the second is, how can the Xoogler community be helpful to you?
Where will I be? I'll now have embarked on this journey with Envera. So I hope to be there for a really, really long time and build out the products that we envision. So that's on a professional side.
20 years time. Where will we be in 20?
20. I think I'll, you know what, like I'm originally from Brazil, but grew up in Europe, and I think eventually I'll make it back to Europe. I do miss it there, and I think it's a bit of a different lifestyle. Today, my life is New York is more conducive to what I'm looking for, but in the future I think Europe will be a better fit. And how can the Xoogler community help? Again, like we're hiring across the board, so I'd love to hear of folks like possibly looking for new gigs. If you do want to talk about like incubators or startups and all that, like I'm more than happy to chat. Yeah, I think those are like the two things really.
Awesome. And just to clarify, the jobs, they're clearly in the Americas time zone, and since you mentioned Europe as well, anything in Asia that people could apply for, or really mainly Europe and the Americas?
Well, so right now we have only folks in the Americas, I believe. But again, my philosophy around hiring is usually, hey, if we find the talent, like and you get the work done, like that's you know, most of the battle already there. Like we can figure things out.
Great. Xooglers, hit up Dan at enverasystems.com. Dan, thanks so much for sharing your career with us and spending the past hour. I've totally enjoyed this and learned a few things myself, even though I have known you for so many years. Too many years to mention on this call. Thanks everyone for joining, and join another Xoogler community session, and appreciate you sharing so much advice, Dan. Good luck.
Thank you, Chris.
See you soon.
Bye, everyone.